There are rules in the wild, simple, brutal contracts written in tooth and claw, understood by every living thing that draws breath beneath an open sky. The elk knows the wolf. The rabbit knows the hawk. It's a terrifying but honest world. The problem is, sometimes you don't know you're part of the contract. You don't know you've been cast in a role. And you certainly don't know which role it is, the hunter or the hunted, until the curtain is already coming down. For Alex Mercer, the wilderness was a cathedral. A 34-year-old landscape photographer with a quiet disposition and a soul worn thin by city life, the Rocky Mountains were his sanctuary. He'd spent a decade learning their language. The sigh of wind through lodgepole pines, the sharp, clean scent of snowmelt, the way the light died on the granite peaks. He was experienced. He was respectful. He was not, he thought, prey. That evening in late September, the world was drenched in gold. Alex was hiking a familiar trail, a ridgeline that offered a god's-eye view of the sprawling valley below. He was chasing the blue hour, that magical fleeting moment after the sun dips below the horizon when the sky bruises to a deep, luminous cobalt. It was his favorite time to shoot. The air was still, holding its breath. The usual chatter of squirrels and jays had fallen silent, a detail his subconscious noted but his conscious mind, focused on f-stops and shutter speeds, dismissed. The first sign was not a sight or a sound. It was a feeling. A cold prickle at the base of his neck, the ancient animal instinct that tells you a predator's gaze has just passed over you. Alex froze, his hand hovering over the tripod. He slowly scanned the tree line, a dense wall of spruce and fir 50 yards away. Nothing, just deep, impenetrable shadow. He shook his head, a small, nervous laugh escaping his lips. The isolation, he told himself, was finally getting to him. He was alone, miles from the nearest road, and his mind was playing tricks. He turned back to his camera, framing a shot of a gnarled, wind-swept pine silhouetted against the fading light. He was so absorbed in the composition, in the delicate dance of light and shadow, that he didn't hear the silence get deeper. He didn't notice the world had gone utterly, unnervingly still. He pressed the shutter. The quiet click of the camera was the last normal sound he would hear for a very long time. That's when he saw it. Or rather, he saw the absence of it. A patch of shadow near the base of a thick aspen grove seemed to detach itself from the others. It was a fluid, boneless movement, a piece of the twilight come to life. It resolved itself into a shape. Long, impossibly sleek, with a tail that seemed to go on forever, ending in a dark, twitching exclamation point. It was low to the ground, a rippling knot of muscle and intent. A puma, a mountain lion, the ghost of the Rockies. Alex's blood ran cold. Every survival article he'd ever skimmed, every documentary he'd ever watched, screamed in his mind. Don't run. Never run. You can't outrun it. Make yourself look big. Make noise. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He fumbled to unclip his heavy pack, his fingers suddenly clumsy and useless. He slowly, deliberately raised his arms, stretching his jacket wide. He tried to shout, but what came out was a strangled croak. The cat watched him. Its head was low, its shoulders bunched. The only thing that moved was the tip of its tail, a slow, hypnotic back and forth. Its eyes, even from this distance, seemed to catch the last embers of the dying day and burn them with a cold, green fire. It wasn't looking at him like an animal. It was looking at him like a problem to be solved, an equation of energy, risk, and reward. And Alex, standing there, suddenly felt very, very small. He took a shaky step back. A twig snapped under his boot. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent amphitheater of the mountains. The puma's ears swiveled, locking onto the sound. And then it began to move. Not a charge, not a sprint. It was worse. It was a walk. A slow, deliberate, almost casual stroll, angling to cut him off from the trail. It flowed over the uneven ground like poured honey, each paw placed with surgical precision. It was circling him, tightening the wire. "Hey!" Alex finally found his voice. It was thin, reedy, pathetic. "Get out of here! Go on, get!" He clapped his hands. The sound was swallowed by the immense space. The lion didn't even flinch. It just kept walking, its unblinking gaze fixed on him. In its eyes, Alex saw an intelligence that terrified him more than its teeth or claws. It wasn't the simple instinctual drive of a predator. It was something older, colder. It was the mountain itself looking back at him and finding him wanting. It was a hunger that had existed long before men had names for the peaks around them. He fumbled for his trekking poles, collapsed and strapped to the side of his pack. His hands shook so violently he could barely work the clasp. The cat was closer now. He could see the bristle of its whiskers, the dark tear-stained lines running from its eyes. He could smell it, a dry, dusty scent, like ozone and old bones. He finally yanked one pole free and extended it with a frantic flick of his wrist. He held it in front of him like a sword, a flimsy, pathetic stick against a force of nature. The standoff felt like an eternity. Alex, a trembling silhouette against a violet sky, and the lion, a seamless part of the coming night. It lowered its head, and a sound rumbled from its chest. It wasn't a roar. It was a growl so low it was felt more than heard, a vibration that seemed to travel through the soles of his boots and up his spine. It was the sound of a tectonic plate shifting deep within the earth. It was the sound of a final warning. Alex knew, with a certainty that was bone deep and absolute, that he was going to die here. On this beautiful, lonely ridge, his last sight would be the indifferent stars and the patient, luminous eyes of his executioner. He thought of his family, of the coffee he'd left on his counter that morning, of all the small, stupid, wonderful things that made up a life. And in that moment, a switch flipped. Terror gave way to a hot, blinding rage. He wasn't an equation. He was a man. He screamed, not a word, but a raw, primal sound torn from the deepest part of his lungs. He charged forward 2 steps, jabbing the trekking pole at the beast. It was the wrong move. The world exploded. The Puma didn't pounce, it detonated. One moment it was 20 feet away, a statue of deadly grace. The next, it was on him. 150 pounds of fluid muscle hit him like a car. The air left his lungs in a whoosh. He was airborne, then crashing backwards onto the rocky ground, his head smacking against a stone with a sickening crack. Stars burst behind his eyes. The weight on his chest was immense, crushing. A hot, foul breath washed over his face. He saw a cavernous mouth full of gleaming white daggers, and then a pain so sharp, so blinding, it transcended all other senses. The cat's jaws had closed on his shoulder, teeth grinding against bone. He felt a grotesque popping sensation as his collarbone splintered. He screamed, but the sound was muffled by the thick fur of the animal's neck pressed against his face. Instinct took over. His left arm was pinned, but his right was free. He still held the trekking pole. He swung it wildly, blindly. The carbide tip connected with something solid. A yowl of fury and pain erupted next to his ear, deafening him. He swung again and again, a frantic, desperate piston of terror. He felt the tip tear through hide, scrape against bone. He aimed for the glowing green eye he could see inches from his own. He felt a sudden release of pressure. The immense weight was gone. He gasped for air, his lungs burning. He scrambled backwards on the ground, crab-walking away, his shredded shoulder screaming in agony. The Puma stood 10 feet away, shaking its massive head. A dark line of blood streamed from a gash above its eye. Its expression was no longer one of cold calculation. It was pure, murderous rage. Its ears were flat against its skull, its lips pulled back in a silent snarl. It gathered itself to spring again. Alex knew he couldn't survive another attack. This was it, the final moment. He braced himself, clutching the bent trekking pole, the world narrowing to a tunnel. And then, a flash. A blinding artificial light flooded the ridge. For a disoriented second, Alex thought he was hallucinating. The Puma flinched, turning its wounded head toward the source. Down the trail, maybe 100 yards away, another light bobbed and weaved through the trees. A headlamp. A voice, distant but clear, called out, "Hello? Is someone up there?" Another hiker. A random, impossible miracle. The Puma looked from the approaching light to Alex, a bloody, broken thing on the ground. Its tail twitched once, twice. It seemed to hang in a state of indecision, the predator's mind weighing the compromised meal against the new, unknown threat. Then, as silently and as suddenly as it had appeared, it turned. It didn't run. It simply melted back into the shadows of the forest, vanishing completely. One moment it was there, a terrifying solid presence. The next, it was gone, leaving only the chilling silence and the coppery smell of blood in the air. Alex lay there, shuddering, listening to the approaching footsteps and the cheerful, oblivious calls of the hiker, who had just, without knowing it, saved his life. He looked at the tree line where the ghost had disappeared. He was alive. He had survived. But as the waves of shock and pain washed over him, he understood that a part of him would forever remain on that ridge, locked in the cold, green gaze of the puma. He had trespassed in a cathedral and had met its God, and he knew he would carry the scars of that brutal sermon for the rest of his days. He had looked into the eyes of the wild, and had seen his own fragile mortality reflected back. If this story of a terrifyingly close call with one of nature's most perfect predators made your heart pound, prove you're not prey by stalking that like button. And subscribe for more true stories from the edge, where the rules are different and survival is never guaranteed.